The Israelis are really concerned about what the Biden administration could do if they're not their shield in the Security Council. We saw them step in for another major vote and veto on the Security Council just last week, protecting Israel. So if the Biden administration removes themselves from the equation, that leaves Israel pretty
Yeah.
exposed until the Trump administration comes in and take place. And it sounds like that was what was communicated. The Biden administration, perhaps they want to get some victory here at the end of his legacy.
Israel looks close to agreeing a ceasefire with Lebanon, and by extension, that means presumably with Hezbollah. What will the deal look like? Zach Anders is a journalist based in Israel. He's been regularly reporting for us on all that's been going on in the Middle East in the last year. Zach, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Stig.
How close are we to this, do you feel?
I'm hearing that it's happening, that this is a security cabinet vote that's all but agreed. Now, the Prime Minister, Netanyahu, has the security cabinet vote, I'm told, to get this passed. It sounds like, however, in the Knesset, throughout the government, there is not a plurality. There is a widespread on the Israeli side frustration at the prospect of signing this deal. I've seen some snap poll results on the local television channels here in Israel. The majority of Israelis don't approve of this. The Israeli sources are saying that this is not going to be a deal that would mean the immediate return of the residents to the north, which is the prime minister's first stated goal of this war. As you dive into why would Israel agree to this ceasefire right now? Well, a few days ago, Amos Hochstein, the U.S. envoy, came from Beirut to Tel Aviv, and what was reported in Israeli channels, I later had confirmed through a government source, was that the deal that Hochstein, the U.S. envoy, presented to the prime minister and to this Israeli cabinet was essentially, I'm going to bow out if you don't agree to this deal, and the Biden administration will not be providing cover for you in the Security Council for the remainder of his term. Now, if you look at what is the current proposed or reported ceasefire that's on the table, it's a 60-day ceasefire. If they signed it today, that would expire on January 25th, which is just days after President-elect Trump will take office. And it's widely believed that the entire makeup of American policy in the Middle East is
Yeah.
going to change on a dime
Well,
in
we,
that moment.
we just had Sebastian Gorka on, who's going to be his new counterterrorism person, and he was incredibly bullish about supporting Netanyahu at all costs, supporting Israel at all costs against what he considers to be terrorists across the board. I think so. I feel that's true. So, what compromise would have to be reached by Hezbollah and Israel for this deal to be signed? What's on the table?
So, yeah, to that point, I think what we're seeing is, and again, the Israeli source that I spoke to this morning said this is a ceasefire. It's not an end to the war, that this is after a year's worth plus of fighting and some arms embargoes from other countries. And right now, the IDF is looking for a window to try and regroup, rearm, prepare for another round of fighting, and also to make sure that the Gaza situation, which is still their conflict in northern Gaza, is still raging, to make sure that for the IDF, they feel that that's in a stable place as well. But what kind of concessions are being made here? Well, we're going to see some massive movement potentially from the players and the parties involved. UNIFIL, about 10,000 peacekeepers are supposed to stay in place, and the Lebanese Armed Forces is supposed to deploy thousands of Lebanese troops into southern Lebanon, and the IDF would pull out. That's the framework of this deal right now. But
And would
I was going back to
those Lebanese troops, actually, sorry to interrupt, those Lebanese troops stop Hezbollah forces in that area? Would they act as a buffer to stop Hezbollah rockets going into Israel? Is that the thinking?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way that 2006, that ceasefire, the UNSC, United Nations 1701, that agreement, it's almost the exact same framework of the same deal from 2006. Bring those Lebanese troops into southern Lebanon and prevent Hezbollah from rearming and not necessarily from Hezbollah, card carrying members from coming into southern Lebanon. A lot of these men live there with their
Yeah.
families in this area. But it's about making sure that Hezbollah can't build infrastructure place some of these larger, more obvious weapons out in fields and orange groves and things like that. So the main element here for the Lebanese armed forces is deploying into an area where for the last several years, politically, they had no influence, and those troops were largely not allowed to come in. Hezbollah was so powerful that the LAF didn't even try to come into some of these villages and establish a presence.
So why would Netanyahu, who's on the cusp of a real political triumph, he's held on in the hope that Trump would become president. Trump has become president. He's got 2 months to wait for him to take over. Why would Netanyahu want to do this over above the Knesset and the Israeli people? Is it he might as well pause in the north to concentrate on rearming and then carry on against Hamas in Gaza? Is that his thinking? Or why would he not just grit his teeth and say, well, but Trump's on the way?
And I am cautious about how I'm approaching today and the
Yeah.
reporting because the next couple of weeks is going to be if we do get a deal signed today, the next couple of weeks is going to be an incredible period with a lot of movement. But from what I am hearing, every indication right now is that Netanyahu is willing to take this period, especially through these winter months. The rain is really making the battlefield in Lebanon just a mess. It's muddy. Tanks are getting stuck. So for him, this
Mm.
is a kind of a perfect window for everybody to rearm on the IDF side and regroup, allow for troops to go home and get rest over the holiday period here. And in theory, this is, again, as I have had this described this morning, a ceasefire, but not an end to this war.
Yeah.
And I think the signs indicate that the Israelis are really concerned about what the Biden administration could do if they're not their shield in the Security Council. We saw them step in for another major vote and veto on the Security Council just last week, protecting Israel. So if the Biden administration removes themselves from the equation, that leaves Israel pretty
Yeah.
exposed until the Trump administration comes in and take place. And it sounds like that was what was communicated. The Biden administration, perhaps they want to get some victory here at the end of his legacy and
Yeah.
say that they did secure a ceasefire, they got the war to stop, and then as Trump rolls into office, this conflict picks back up again. And there's some mechanisms in this deal that is the latitude for Israel to re-engage,
Yeah.
is pretty severe.
Yeah. So the timing might actually just work out in that sense because of what you're saying. That really interesting stuff as ever, Zach. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Stig.
That's Zach Anders there, a journalist in Israel.